Maddie and I've just been doing some shopping. This bag is really easy for me to lift, but this one, it's too heavy.
There are lots of heavy things that we can't lift, like a shopping trolley full of food, a motorbike, or a big pile of bricks. So, how can we lift heavy items up? That's right, by using a forklift truck.
Forklift trucks are used to lift really bulky, heavy things. But do you know how a forklift truck works? Let's find out.
How does it work?
Forklift truck.
To find out how a forklift truck works, I've come here to a warehouse.
A warehouse is where lots and lots of items are stored. And Nick is a forklift truck driver here. You should never go close or play near a forklift truck without a grown-up, but I've got special permission to show you how they work. And I'm wearing a special high-visibility jacket to make sure Nick can see me. This part is called the forks, and it looks a little bit like a fork that you eat with. And just like a fork, it's the part that scoops and lifts things up.
These are called pallets, and they're made of planks of wood.
Pallets are very strong, which means heavy things can be put on top of them. And underneath, they have 2 spaces for the forklift truck's forks to slide into.
The forks are attached to the carriage, and this tall part here is called the mast. Can you see that chain? It looks like a huge bike chain, doesn't it? Well, that's called the mast chain, and it lifts the forks and the carriage up and down. But how does a forklift this size lift really heavy things all the way up there without tipping over? Let's find out. Here, I've got a plank of wood and some different size pots of paint. What do you think will happen if I put one small pot of paint on one side and a big, heavy pot of paint on the other? Should we find out?
Ooh, that's right. The big pot of paint slides off. But look what happens when we put a small pot of paint on each side. It doesn't tip over.
That's because the pot of paint on this side weighs the same as the pot of paint on that side. It's called counterbalance.
And a forklift truck also has counterbalance, a heavy weight inside at the back, so it can pick things up at the front and not tip forwards.
But to find out how it lifts them really high in the air, I think we need to take a closer look.
First, the driver moves the forklift forward, so the forks slide into the pallet. Next, the driver pulls a lever. This pushes oil into the bottom of a hollow tube, called a hydraulic cylinder. Inside the hydraulic cylinder is a piston. The oil being pushed into the cylinder pushes the piston up. As the piston pushes up, it lifts the mast, and the mast chain starts to pull the carriage and the forks up. The forklift truck moves into position in front of a shelf. When the forks are at the right height, it drops slightly. The back wheels turn, and the forklift truck reverses, leaving the pallet on the shelf. The driver pushes a lever, which lets the oil out of the hydraulic cylinder. The piston moves back down, lowering the mast, the carriage, and the forks. And off it goes, ready to lift another pallet.
Wow, that was really interesting. Shall we take a look for ourselves? I've got some of my special cameras here to attach to the forklift so we can see what happens when it moves a heavy pallet onto one of the top shelves. We're ready to go. I've connected the special cameras to this screen so I can watch what's happening. Okay, Nick, we're ready to go.
Look, Nick's putting the forks into the 2 holes in the pallet.
That's so it can lift the heavy things up really easily.
And now he's pulling the lever, which lets oil into the pistons, so the mast and carriage can take the pallet up.
Whoa. The forklift is moving the pallet so high.
And it's not falling over because of the counterbalance at the back of the forklift truck. Nick then drives the forklift forward and pushes the lever to lower the pallet onto the shelf safely.
Can you hear that sound? That beeping tells us that the forklift is reversing.
Nick finishes by pushing the lever one last time, which brings the carriage all the way to the floor. So he can drive off.
How amazing was that? I think forklift trucks are brilliant. What was your favourite part about finding out how they work?
Can you remember the part of the forklift truck the forks are attached to? That's right, it's the carriage. Did you hear the sound the forklift truck made when it reversed? And did you see the way the forklift truck lifted the pallet really high on my special camera?
Forklifts are great for lifting really heavy things, like boxes of fruit. Here, I've got a box of apples. What's your favourite fruit? I love grapes, and I love these too, raisins. But did you know that raisins are just grapes that have been dried? There are lots of different types of dried fruit, like bananas, apricots, and even pineapples. But do you know how dried fruit is made? Let's find out.
How is it made?
Dried fruit.
Dried fruit is made here, on a farm. This is an apple orchard. And look, you can see the apples starting to grow. Today, they're turning apples that have already been picked into these dried apple slices.
But first, they need to be taken from the field in these big apple bins to the factory.
This is a bin tipper, and it tips the apples into this giant washing machine.
To clean the apples, they take a ride on this very special conveyor belt. And then they get dropped off into a big bath of water.
The apples bob along the water and come to here. The apple ladder, which carries the apples up to the next stage. This is the apple orientation machine. Can you see the apples fall into a little hole? And under each hole is a wheel that spins around and it turns the apple until the stalk is facing up. How brilliant is that?
Underneath the stalk is a part of the apple called the core. And to make dried apple slices, the orientation machine lifts the apples off the little holes to remove the core.
Whoa, look! The machine is pushing the core out of the apple, leaving a big hole in the middle.
After the metal rods have made a hole in the middle of the apple, they slide onto another rod, ready for them to be sliced into two halves. Before they come out the end of the machine, down some slides and booms.
It's like a water park for apples. There they go, down the slide. The apples slide down onto this table. Can you see that it's jiggling around? We say that it's vibrating. And as the table vibrates, the apples jump up and down, and it shakes any of the pips off. Can you jiggle like an apple? That is the sound of jets of air blasting water off the apple half.
Sounds a bit like a vacuum cleaner.
Now the apples need to be sliced. This is a slicing machine, and inside there are 8 really sharp blades that cut the apples into thin slices like this.
This machine cuts 8,000 apple slices a minute. So to see how it works, I'm going to use one of my special cameras.
This is my special slow motion camera. It lets us film things that happen really quickly, but watch them back slower.
Look, the drum is spinning the apple pieces around really quickly. And can you see those wavy bits of metal? They're the blades that chop the apple pieces into slices. But where have they all gone? Oh, there they are. Look at all those apple slices.
Our apples are the right size and shape now, aren't they? But they're still moist and a little bit bendy. Apples are really juicy because they've got lots of water inside them. If I squeeze this apple slice, can you see all of that juicy water coming out? But to make apple slices, we want them to be dry and crispy, so we have to take the water out. It's called dehydration. And it happens inside this machine. It's called a dehydrator. Look how big it is. It's 14 meters long.
Inside, the dehydrator machine blows hot air onto the apple slices for 12 hours.
Off they go.
The machine blows away all the water. It's a bit like a really big hairdryer.
When the apples come out, they look a little bit different. They're smaller and shriveled up. That's because the water that was inside has gone. And now the apple slices are dry and crispy.
Dried apple slices are then put onto another conveyor belt and are carried up to the packing machine, which drops the right amount of apple slices into each packet before they're sealed.
It's like a bee, isn't it? And here we have a finished packet of dried apples, all ready to eat. I loved seeing how dried fruit is made. What was your favourite part?
Do you remember the name of the machine that made sure the apples were the right way up? That's right, it's called the orientation machine. Do you remember the sound the air jets made when they dried off the apples? And did you see the apples getting chopped into slices on a special slow motion camera?
So the next time you try dried fruit, like dried apple, you'll know how it was made. And when you see a forklift truck, you'll know how it lifts really heavy things really high up. I'll see you next time.
There are lots of things